We are a mere 30 days away from watching the Auburn Tigers play football, and today I'm joined by Zac Blackerby of Locked on Auburn and our own Village Vice. Zac, what's up?
What's up? Happy start of fall camp day. Is that a thing?
Yeah, hey, we can make it a thing. We can make it a
Sure.
thing. Your favorite day of the year?
Feels like the hottest day of the year. That's for sure.
Okay, so we're obviously coming off a very, very exciting weekend of recruiting for Auburn football.
Yeah.
I think people started to feel like we were in a bit of a lull, but I think that this weekend made up for it. And a lot of what I'm hearing, and I think it's probably just opposing fan bases trying to kill our joy, but Auburn currently has commitments from 8 of the top 10 players in the state of Alabama in the class of 2025. And you're hearing, I'll start believing in Auburn when Hugh proves that he can recruit out of state. Madness like that. But I've heard you talk multiple times on your show about why in-state recruiting matters. So can you please share with the class?
Well, I think it's the most sustainable thing. You play more home games than you do road games. And so when your staff is at home and it's a Thursday night or a Friday night, and either guys that you're targeting or guys that are committed or guys who are committed elsewhere that you're trying to flip, you're able to go to their games if they're, just a few hours away from your campus. And like, if you feel like another school's really pushing for a kid that you've got committed to you in California, like there's just only so much that you can do. And it is fascinating what Kalen DeBoer is doing in Alabama. And I'm not saying it's the wrong tactic. It hasn't been done before where you've been able to have a top 2 class and you don't get any of the top 10 players in your own state. I mean, Nick Saban never did that, right? And obviously what he did at Alabama was historic. I'm not saying it's not going to work. It's weird. We haven't seen anything like that before, Taylor.
I'll use Alabama as an example because of what Kalen DeBoer is doing right now. But
yeah,
and just if you're talking about any program, my question is that sustainable for anyone? And I'm letting myself be excited. I'm feeling the joy, and I believe, according to 24/7, I think that all of the top 10 Alabama guys that are committed to Auburn right now are ranked in the top 100 in the country.
Yeah, I think that's correct. It's not like Alabama doesn't produce elite talent, right?
Yeah.
I mean, what do we do? It's not like we're in Idaho. You know what I mean? So yeah, is it sustainable? It hasn't been done before. That doesn't mean it's impossible. I mean, college football has become so fluid in everything and so national in everything, with the transfer portal, with NIL, with coaches seeming to be less loyal now. Has that trickled all the way down to high school recruiting? I don't know. My gut says no, Taylor, but just because it hasn't been done doesn't mean it's impossible. I would rather, and this is weird because Auburn's class is 5th or 6th, depending on where you look, and Alabama's, I think, is 2 across the board, but I'd rather have Auburn's situation on the recruiting trail right now than I would Alabama's.
And I do wonder if, when this time next season comes around, will things look different in the state because of what you said earlier? You can't fly to California on a Thursday night over and over and over to watch kids that you might have been recruiting, in the past years. That's not realistic. But
and I don't think it is going to look different. I mean, if anything, I think Auburn's going to have it locked down more in the 2026 class than they do now. I mean, what they've done within the state is insane. Anthony Jones, I think he ends up in Auburn's class, the top player in the state. Hezekiah Harrison, number 2 guys committed. I don't know a whole lot about Zion Gibson, but Shadarius Tootle's already committed. Vonnie Cleveland is probably going to go to Auburn. Jaquez Wilkes, I believe, Auburn is the favorite for him. J. Mike Garrett committed this past weekend. It's just, I don't know, Taylor. Like, I don't think there's going to be a whole lot of change when you look at it from this year to next year, as far as the top 10 in the state.
There obviously is a lot of, I guess we can call it, pressure on Hugh and Auburn to perform on the field this year.
Yeah.
yes, recruiting's great, but if you have another 6 and 7 season, a lot of these guys that are committed and haven't signed might end up elsewhere.
I don't buy that though. I mean, I know a
Okay.
lot of people are saying that, and I've seen that commented a ton. And in fact, I kind of talked about this a little bit the other day, and people said I was wrong, which is fine. But I don't think people are committing to Hugh Freeze and Auburn because they expect Auburn to win a championship this year or to be, a top 10 team this year. The sales pitch isn't, hey, we're going to be good this year and even better next year with you. The pitch is, we need you right away. And we've sold you on this vision and this future of restoring Auburn to former glory because we need you right away. I don't think the success or failure of the 2024 season is going to be that big of an impact to a lot of these guys. Now, would Auburn lose one or two? Maybe, but I think a lot of these guys are sold on helping restore Auburn to the level where it's supposed to be. So obviously 6 and 7 would stink. That would be brutal. And there'd be so many negative things about that, Taylor, but I don't think losing recruits would be one of them.
My initial thought was, what does Auburn have to do this season
Yeah.
to retain the majority of these guys? But then throughout the process of what's happened the past week, basically now, it's impressive no matter what, but it's more impressive to me because they don't have the look what this is pitch. And what you're saying is very valid. And hey, I could come in as a freshman and I could get a lot of playing time, but it's more impressive to me that they're doing this with what the past 3 years have been.
Yeah, coming off of 3 losing seasons, no question about it. And that's why I don't think this is why they're committing. They want to build. They want to build something. And I don't think that motive changes if you lose a game or two less than what you're supposed to. Now, I don't think Auburn's going 6 and 7. I can see this already on message board saying Blackerby doesn't know what he's talking about. That's not what I'm saying. I think Auburn's a 7 and 5 or an 8 and 4 football team. I thought that before all of these recruits came in. I'm thinking that now. But, I've just seen that narrative a lot out there, Taylor, and I just kind of wanted to push back on it for a second.
The 2025 quarterback, that's what people have been wondering and talking about for what feels like months now.
Yeah.
The Juju Lewis saga
took 8 minutes to get here,
exhausting.
Taylor. Took 8 minutes to get here. That's awesome.
But probably about 30 minutes before we started, On3 sent out an article about Ole Miss, Notre Dame, and Auburn in regard to Deuce Knight.
Yeah.
Where's he going to end up? Who knows? But do you think if Auburn were to flip him, that would have an impact on players that, might be committed somewhere else that Auburn's still pushing really hard for? Do you think that it could lead to a ripple effect of, players that want to play with him, but also play in the SEC coming with him? What do you think that would look like if Auburn were to flip Deuce Knight?
Yeah, I mean, you got to think that some of the receivers that Auburn has been pursuing are going to be more likely to listen and take them a little bit more seriously if there's a quarterback in the class, which makes sense. Obviously, they flipped Derek Smith from Alabama earlier this week, and he's going to be probably the top receiver in this class unless they somehow get Caleb Cunningham to flip from Bama as well. I'm not holding my breath for that one. Some people believe it could be possible if you get a Deuce Knight or some elite quarterback in there, but I don't know who that quarterback is going to be. If it's not Deuce Knight, it does get interesting of like, okay, does Auburn even get a quarterback? I don't know, but there's a lot of smoke around Deuce Knight, and boy, that would be exciting if he did end up in the class.
This is a question from Hunter. Hunter, what's up, Hunter? He said, what to you has been the most surprising move Auburn has made during this recruiting hot streak?
I'm going to say Antonio Coleman taking his commitment again after, Bama to Auburn, Bama back to Auburn. I didn't see that being a thing. In fact, I heard folks saying the coaching staff didn't necessarily want to open that up again, but he came to Big Cat. Clearly, I mean, it sounds like this staff made him really kind of prove that he wanted to be part of this class. And I just didn't. I missed that. I missed all of that. And the folks that I talked to within the program, I don't know. I just never picked that one up. So I think flipping Antonio Coleman was probably my biggest surprise. And I think he's an awesome player. I'm super stoked that they did it.
During whatever I don't remember what their high school media days are called, but
sure,
he did say into a microphone, Auburn is home. I'm done. And, you know, a lot of the response that's obviously like, okay, buddy, we've seen what's happened, but he's pledging his alliance to Auburn. So hopefully
I hope
he
he does. Yeah, I hope he does. And I mean, he said good things about both programs and bad things about both programs during this recruitment. And, you know, I hope Auburn is home for him. I think he's a really, really good player. And yeah, I'm excited that he's, you know, part of this class again.
All right, let's move on to fall camp. It obviously just started today, so it's hard to make any big statement off of watching one day of practice. But I read what you wrote.
Taylor, those receivers. Go ahead. Ask the question. Okay. I'm sorry.
You're excited. You're excited. But I read what you wrote for Auburn Daily today, and two quotes that stood out to me where you said, Damari Austin looks like a different player.
Yeah.
And I've been going to these practices for the last decade, and I have never seen a receiver group anywhere close to this one. And I could probably say the same thing about the offensive line.
Yeah, I mean, day one, you don't have a whole lot to go off of, like you said, but you do have the eye test. You can say, this looks different than it has in previous years. And Damari looked exceptional. No question about it. He looks like he's put on some weight, but it looks like it's all muscle, very, very lean, a guy that looks very difficult to tackle, and also switch numbers to 0, which I'm normally against, but he made it look really cool. So we'll see. I mean, I love deuces, but yeah, I think him switching to age at 0 is pretty cool. But yeah, the wide receivers, it looks so different. In fact, I was standing next to Lance Dahl on the sideline, kind of watching it. And we were both we had never seen anything like this at Auburn before. And like we had gushed over Cam Coleman this past spring, but I mean, he even looked more developed in this summer. You could tell he's been putting the work in. But Perry Thompson, who's been here 5 minutes, didn't get to go through spring. It's just, I don't know, like physically, there's only so much you can do to cover these types of wide receivers because their catch radius is going to be so much larger than the corners in the SEC that are going to be guarding them. And so obviously that's exciting. But then KeAndre Lambert-Smith, the transfer that they added recently from Penn State, who didn't get to go through spring either, he checked every box for me. He looked a little bit quicker than I was expecting. And Taylor, I love that pretty much after every rep, a coach would go to KLS and coach him up. I mean, you can feel the urgency and the importance placed on him where it's like, we've got to get you ready. We need you ready day one. There is no acclimation period for you. You're that important. But those two guys, and then it's like Camden Brown is super, super developed and physically what you want at wide receiver. Bryce Cain's coming along as well. He kind of had a few pop moments during our media viewing window. And then obviously Rivaldo Fairweather's Rivaldo Fairweather. And it's just the idea of the stress you put on a defense just physically. Scheme is one thing, sure, but at some points, Auburn's offense is just going to say, hey, our guys are bigger and better than you. Let's see if you can guard them when you've got Cam Coleman, Perry Thompson, KLS, or Rivaldo Fairweather out there. That's a lot to handle, Taylor, and Auburn hasn't had that in a long time.
A lot of pushback on excitement around the receivers, obviously, is, kind of pointed towards Payton Thorne. And my argument to that, or rebuttal, is always, if you look in, okay, so Jim Dunaway, this is a great example, was watching, he's the best. And he does show notes, we'll just put on random games from whatever year, and he'll just rewatch them. And he texted me the other night, and he said, I'm watching the Auburn-Georgia game from last year. I can't remember the exact details. It was late into the game.
Yeah.
And he said, Auburn is up. I can't remember what the score was, but he basically said, every single ball that Payton Thorne has thrown has hit the hands of a receiver and been dropped.
Yeah.
And I feel like, obviously, a lot of the guys, KeAndre Lambert-Smith has Big Ten experience, but some of the other guys that Auburn's going to be depending on are younger, but how much just the overall talent of what's around him, how much better do you think that will make Payton look because of the increase in talent?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be things going to be night and day. I mean, I asked him that point blank. It's like, hey, at Michigan State, you had 3 guys that are now in the NFL. Is what you have now at Auburn close to that? And he said, yes. Yes, absolutely. And, with Cam and KLS, he gushed about KLS over and over and over again, kind of talked about the night where they all went to dinner and he got to meet him before he actually committed. And I mean, this is a guy who's like made it a priority to get KLS involved, which is obviously part of it. And Cam Coleman is special. He's been asked about Cam Coleman now a million times. But yeah, we've seen Payton be successful when he had guys to throw to, and he had a good running game with Kenneth Walker. And I think the running game is fine. I don't think anybody's concerned about the group of backs that he's going to be handing the ball off to. It's going to get the ball in the hands of these guys. And Taylor just looks different. This year looks different with the guys that he's throwing to. And it's a nice mix, right? It's a nice mix of KLS, who's got 1 year left of eligibility, if my understanding is correct. And you've got these young guys with Cam Coleman and Perry Thompson. Rivaldo Fairweather's an older guy. So, I mean, you've got this nice combination of talented veterans, but also just these special freshmen. So there's a lot to like about what they're putting together.
This is a question from ER Smith 14, and I feel like you kind of just answered it. But he said, what did you see today that made you feel better about taking the over on Auburn's win total? And if I had to guess, I would say the receivers.
Yeah, the receivers for sure. I'll say something else though. Assuming Auburn's win total is 7.5, and we got to get to 8-4. Auburn doesn't go up against a lot of the top offensive lines projected as much as you can project offensive lines. They're missing a lot of them. Obviously, they've got to play Georgia. Missouri's is supposed to be pretty decent. You got to play Alabama, but I think a potential mismatch that Auburn could see, like in these big games, Oklahoma, Texas A&M, is can they rush the passer, which has been my biggest concern about this roster since the start of spring. And Kieran Crawford, the new edge rusher from Arkansas State, he looks long, he looks quick and agile, which is what they need. And then, obviously Jalen McLeod, but, Keldrick Falk looked the part. I mean, we all saw how big he was standing next to him in person at SEC Media Days a few weeks ago. And so he certainly looks the part. But man, Isaiah Rakes, the new nose tackle, him and Jason Jones. I mean, that's just a lot of man that these opposing offensive lines are going to have to block. I mean, if they're both on the field at the same time, that's 700 pounds of force that you've got to stop. And so I think just the overall depth on the defensive line, I thought they looked good. I didn't spend as much time watching the defense as I did the offense earlier today, but I do think what I saw of the defensive front was better than what I was expecting and better what we saw in the spring. So to not say receivers, I'll say the defensive front because of the mismatches that could happen this season.